Remember by Christina Rossetti is a poem written in 1849 when the poet herself was still a teenager. And just for a bit of a change, and because it's a female voice that we hear, I've got Mrs. Beasley this time to read the poem.
Remember me when I am gone away, gone far away into the silent land, when you can no more hold me by the hand, nor I half turn to go, yet turning stay. Remember me when no more day by day you tell me of our future that you planned. Only remember me. You understand it will be late to counsel then or pray. Yet if you should forget me for a while and afterwards remember, do not grieve. For if the darkness and corruption leave a vestige of the thoughts that once I had, better by far you should forget and smile than that you should remember and be sad.
So Remember is a Victorian poem about loss, mourning and, of course, remembrance. Sonnets are 14-line poems with an average of 10 syllables per line. And this one is a Petrarchan sonnet, which means it is separated into an octave, which are the first 8 lines, and a sestet, which is the final 6 lines. And the way that you can tell this is by looking at the rhyme scheme, and that means by numbering the types of rhymes that there are. So if we look at the first line here, away, so we always call this first one the A line. And we look down and we see away, land, no, away, hand, no, away, stay. So we label that A, stay, day is A, and pray here is also the A line. The B lines, then we've got land and hand and planned, understand. So you can see these 8 lines grouped together by the rhyme scheme that they've got, and we call that the octave, and you can do the same for the sestet, and that'll look like this. And the choice of this structure is interesting because sonnets are usually on the topic of love, and although this poem is addressed to a loved one, the main theme of the poem is death, which the poet actually struggles to refer to directly and instead uses euphemisms, which are words used to soften taboo subjects like death. Gone away and the silent land are 2 examples of this. The premise of the poem is the poet Rossetti talking to a loved one about how she wants them to react and behave when she dies, which might make you think that the poet was old when she composed this, but in fact she was only 19. So the cause of these morbid thoughts may be the serious illness she suffered at the age of 15, which caused her to seriously consider her own mortality. She was also engaged early to a man called James Collinson, but the engagement ended after 2 years, breaking down because she didn't want to compromise on the fervent religious views she had inherited from her mother. Collinson converted to Catholicism, and this effectively ended their relationship. However, the opinion is that these 2 were together when the poem was written, but these events were certainly around the same time. She begins the poem with an imperative, which is where the verb is put at the beginning of a sentence. In this case, the word remember. And imperatives are used to give commands or instructions. Rossetti is telling her loved one how she wants him to behave after her death. She also wants to emphasise the distance that will exist between them when she has died. First of all, she says gone away, and then she further emphasises this with gone far away, which serves to emphasise the lost connection between them and the distance which now separates them. This is then juxtaposed with the intimacy of the following line, when you can no more hold me by the hand. And this contrast in distance seems to be a deliberate device to enhance the emotional impact of the lines. Rossetti wants the listener to imagine an intimate, loving relationship separated by death. But there is perhaps another way of reading this line. The phrasing and order of the pronouns is quite interesting. You hold me, which seems to indicate a kind of possession. So perhaps Rossetti is saying that after death he will no longer be able to possess her in the way that he used to. The fourth line in this quatrain is as interesting as it is ambiguous. The poet is reflecting on their relationship, as in the previous line when she imagines them holding hands. But this is a different recollection. When I half turn to go, yet turning stay. And to me, this points to a quite turbulent relationship where Rossetti thought about leaving, possibly more than once, but ultimately chose to stay, at least until the religious divide, which I mentioned before. The poet refers directly to the intended listener again in the next group of 4 lines, which she begins with another imperative, telling the listener again to remember me. And Rossetti creates another imagined image of tenderness when she speaks about her partner who tells me of the future that you planned. And it's heartbreaking stuff. If we imagine that Rossetti, deeply in love and ready to marry, believed that she was going to die at a young age, then any plans they might have made for the future are redundant. However, there is another way of reading this, and it sort of connects with the point I made just now about the possessive nature of him holding her hand. Well, look at the phrasing here. You tell me of our future that you planned. And some critics have certainly interpreted this poem, using this line as an example, as drawing attention to the passive nature of women in Victorian England. For me, the next line is one of the most interesting and one of the most ambiguous, and Rossetti deliberately changes the structure of the line, even though the sentiment might, on first glance, seem the same. Is she just repeating, as she did previously, the desire to be remembered? No. Here there is a clear difference. Rossetti writes, only remember me, with the clear emphasis this time on the word only. So one way of interpreting this line is to replace the word only with the word just, as if to emphasise the fact that whatever heartbreak and sorrow he might be feeling, he should focus on the remembrance of the time they had together, and that is all. So in this interpretation, we're seeing the word just as in to mean and no other. Think only of me. Even when I'm dead, only me. And in this interpretation, Rossetti is saying that after death, she does not want her partner to recover and move on, but to mourn and think only of the time they had together. The words counsel and pray in the next line are both suggestive of the sort of advice a troubled couple might seek if we follow the interpretation from before. And the sense seems to be that after death it will be too late to wish they had the sort of advice that perhaps they needed. Either that, or it's another example of the passive existence that women experienced in Victorian England. Here, her partner is portrayed as someone who counsels her, gives her advice, and prays for her, which assumes some sort of spiritual superiority. The next line introduces the sestet, which, as I mentioned before, is the group of 6 lines in this sonnet structure. And because we've moved from the octave to the sestet, the theme of the poem has altered slightly as well. In the octave, Rossetti has been concerned with how, after her death, her partner should remember her, must remember her. It's repeated several times, while in the sestet, her attention turns to the possibility that he might, at some point in the grieving process, not be thinking about her. Yet, if you should forget. And this is another structural device known as a volta, or turning point. And this, for me at least, is the most emotionally powerful part of the poem, and it adds to the slightly tentative tone of the piece. Imagine having the strength of character to be able to imagine your partner getting over your death or forgetting about you, even if it was only for a while. She's imagining the guilt her partner might feel if he should forget about her and then suddenly remember. And Rossetti is trying to unburden him of this potential guilt by saying that he should not grieve or be sad or beat himself up about it. And in the final 4 lines, the poet explains why. While the octave was filled with an insistence on being remembered, the sestet instructs him to get on with his life after her death. There is more euphemistic language here, with darkness and corruption suggesting the grave and decaying body. And Rossetti is saying that long after her death, when her body has decayed in the earth, there may be some trace, fragment, or vestige of her memory left with her partner, and this might make him feel sad. If this is the case, Rossetti says, it would be better for him to forget her completely and smile. It's worth pointing out the effect of the rhyme at the end of this poem, because by rhyming the word had with the word sad in the final line, the poet is drawing a connection between the 2 most important ideas and themes in the poem, that of forgetting and remembering.